In 1944, a Finnish soldier named Emil Koivunen was absolutely exhausted. His unit had been skiing in knee-deep snow non-stop for almost 2 entire days, and it definitely didn't help that the weather was 15 degrees below zero and was only going to get colder. But as Emil's group was finally able to set up camp in the woods and take a small break, they were immediately ambushed by Russian soldiers. Emil's group was heavily outnumbered, so they immediately began to retreat. But since Emil himself hadn't properly slept in days and also only had a small piece of bread to eat that morning, he found himself about to fall asleep in the worst possible situation to do so. However, luckily for Emil, he had one thing none of the other soldiers did. Emil was in charge of his entire group's supply of pervitin, which was basically crystal meth that was given to soldiers to help them fight better. Emil knew he had to take some if he wanted to survive, but as he tried to get one pill from inside the container, his heavy mittens made him clumsy and he ended up pouring the entire thing into his hand. In his panic, Emil just said screw it and ate them all. Keep in mind that the safe dosage for pervitin is 1 pill per day. Emil took 30. As you can imagine, a few minutes later, Emil was absolutely tripping balls. As he skied, the entire landscape began to morph before his eyes. Eventually, Emil's fellow soldiers noticed that he wasn't looking so good, so they took his gun away. Emil completely blacked out soon after that, and when he woke up, he realized that everyone had already left him. He was all alone in the dangerous wilderness with no gun, no food, and still high as a kite. At that point, Emil just kept floating in and out of conscience, blacking out and then waking up in a completely different place. At one point, he suddenly found himself standing at the top of a hill when he spotted a fire burning in the distance with some people standing around it. He immediately thought it was a camp full of German allies, so he began happily skiing towards them so they could rescue him. But as Emil got closer to the camp, skiing full speed down the hill, he suddenly realized they were actually Russian enemies. By that point, he was already moving too fast to slow down. But luckily for him, the Russians were so surprised to see a high Finnish soldier randomly skiing towards them, they didn't even react. And by the time they had realized what happened, Emil was already long gone. Over the next few days, Emil just wandered around, surviving on pine needles and water. Somehow, even after all that time, he was still high, and he imagined himself fighting a wolverine that ended up just being a tree branch. Eventually, he accidentally stepped on a landmine, and when he looked down at his foot, he could literally see bones poking through the flesh. But of course, being in the condition he was, he barely even noticed, and just promptly started hopping around. And that was when he set off landmine number 2, and that one actually seriously hurt him. As he lay there in a ditch, heavily wounded and still tripping out of his mind, he was eventually discovered by a group of Finnish soldiers. He was finally brought to a hospital, and when he got there, his heart rate was measured at 200 beats per minute, more than double than what is normal. He also only weighed 94 pounds, and as it turns out, he had somehow traveled 250 miles in 2 weeks without even knowing it. Incredibly, Emil Koivunen not only survived the experience, but he also managed to live a long and happy life, finally dying at the age of 71.